Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork Podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Today we have Seth Clark, who is owner of Dovetail Recruiting, an architectural millwork recruiting firm. And we're going to talk about his background, owning a shop himself, and how he got to where he's at. Good morning, Seth.
Good morning, Jacob. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us.
Of course.
I appreciate you jumping in here and being willing to do this. You and I met recently at the AWI convention obviously seen you on LinkedIn and recruiting, but it was our first time meeting in person. So I appreciate you jumping in and doing this so fast.
Oh, yeah. No, of course. Yeah. Same story on my end. It's funny. Right before we met at AWI, I had a handful of people recommend that I reach out to you. So yeah, it was hardly a coincidence, I think, that we met there.
Yeah. No, it's a huge industry, bigger than I think most people realize, but it's a small world, a small community. And everybody knows of each other, talks to each other, and eventually it comes full circle pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
To jump in and get started, I want to talk about your background. And you have a unique background in this industry, especially in what you're doing now, in that you ran a shop, you owned a shop for many years before you got into the recruiting side of things, right?
I did. Yes.
You want to tell me a little bit about you got started, your background, how you got into the industry and owning a shop, and then to where you're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think if anybody's been on my website, they've certainly read this story. But I think like a lot of people in this industry, my story started on job sites. It started in sawdust. My dad was a residential contractor, carpenter by trade, and I taught cabinet making at a technical high school when I was very young. And I think really it's just one of those things that kind of happens in your blood or in my blood. So yeah, some of my earliest childhood memories are from residential job sites, making little weird things out of 2x4 cutoffs and, cutting myself with tools I probably shouldn't have been using. And then really just stuck with it. That turned into summer jobs in junior high and high school, a local cabinet shop in my town in Massachusetts I grew up in. At the time, this would have been the 90s. So was a lot of assisted living facilities. So really cut my teeth on post lambing ADA vanities, lots of them, hand sanding, lineal feed, clear wood trim and things like that. So, doing the things, right? But that my growing up, my interest in being what I would call a technician, right? Somebody who is fabricating and has a real desire to do, kind of stuck with me through college, informed what I studied in college, informed what I did in college. My job in college was to be one of the shop managers in our little wood shop, right? Which really just amounted to me helping art students make canvas stretchers. But I did in fact learn to weld in college, which was fun. I'm no good at it anymore, but yeah, out of college, did historic preservation, blended my studies, which were in history of architecture, and all of my work experience up to that point, which was, again, in residential construction and a certain amount of commercial millwork. But did that for a little while before going out on my own and starting a woodshop. That story is a little longer than just that. I had a business partner involved in my shop, and we actually were trying to buy a shop in Denver. But at the time, this was just coming out of the downturn, 08, 09, 2010. And after a number of meetings, the owner of that shop decided he wanted to at least have some decent backlog. He had already had 2 pretty crummy years and thought his business would at least justify what he was asking with better backlog. But in the meantime, I ended up finding a shop full of used equipment, a beam saw, a small bander, a small point-to-point, a wide belt sander, and a few other things. And we ended up buying that and starting the shop that I would then own for 10 years.
You essentially started from scratch.
Oh, in the first few months, I was doing everything. We had a Holzer beam saw, BSE point-to-point, Holzer bander. So I was fumbling through poor translations of German and Italian user manuals trying to figure out how to use these things because My background, the shop that I worked in as a kid didn't have any big CNC equipment. It was more of a traditional shop. You had your cut guy who was on like a big Powermatic PM, whatever that saw is that you've seen in every shop. And then just a lot of bench work, right? A lot, like I said, there's a lot of like post lambing stuff. So learning the CNC equipment and also at the same time trying to make contacts in the industry, the construction industry in Denver, and then bidding work. And that was a whole nother thing. And then once I actually won a project, the first project we won was like $14,000. It's like a couple of elevations of some P-Lam cabs and a few other things. Then building it. And so as we built some traction, was able to hire, and we closed the shop. I think we were 7 people and still in the same 4,000 square feet that equipment was in when I bought the equipment. That's how I wound up in commercial woodworking. Pretty early on, got involved with AWI to bring it back to how you and I met, which proved to be invaluable, really. I'm still involved today, which is great.
So what motivated you or made you like start down the path of, hey, I want to go find a shop to buy to begin with? Obviously you had experience in the industry, and I assume you had confidence. I can do this. I can figure this out. I know how to do the work. But from my perspective, I think it's pretty rare for somebody to, at a young age, as you were, I assume at that point, to say, hey, I want to go start my own shop or buy a shop, right?
Yeah, I would love to say it was solely my decision. I'm that entrepreneur, but I'm definitely not. It was a discussion between my business partner and myself. Okay. And, my business partner was, for the most part, just the money side of things, and also a lot of like back-end support, business education, all of that stuff. My company was part of a much larger group of companies in Denver. But really, I would say he was probably the driver.
So you had a relationship with somebody that was motivated and set up to do it, and they trusted in you and had faith in your experience for that specific business.
Correct. And to be honest, this particular shop, it was before I opened Boston Woodworking, which is what we called my shop in Denver. I was doing like a little bit of work here and there for friends. I had a buddy whose dad was a local like residential developer. He'd do the occasional custom item. So I did this big custom door. It was a big slab entry door where the veneer kind of tracked through the whole, like the surround and the door itself. So I had to find somebody that could press that. And that's actually how I learned of the shop that we tried to then purchase. They were, small. So like, I think they were like $5 million a year, but just doing like really custom stuff, like super high end. I think they did probably 50% of the law firms in Denver. They did the interiors. So that's how I knew of this shop. They had done some custom pressing for me. Custom veneer layouts. And so, we started a discussion. It fell apart after a few meetings. And, like I said, as luck not, but a few weeks later, I found a listing for a bunch of equipment. Once we had been set on that path of starting or taking over a business, right? But going into business, whether we were purchasing one or starting in the commercial millwork space, I was, okay, this is what we're doing. So I was looking everywhere, Craigslist, all the resources that exist for purchasing equipment to business, we were exploring.
Right. And so you ran that shop for about 10 years or so?
Yeah, just about 10 years.
Okay. And obviously since then now, that shop is no longer, and you are full-time doing Dovetail recruiting. You started your own firm for recruiting specific in this industry. What was your experience as a business owner? Because you ran a shop, and of what I assume would be like one of your customers today.
Correct.
The experiences you had in running a shop and trying to recruit yourself that led you to have the confidence that I could recruit for others, and B, that this is a need in the industry.
Yeah. There's a handful of things, answers to both those questions that kind of came together to that quintessential light bulb moment for me. One was just simply the fact that when my shop was at its height, I was doing a lot of things, no longer making things anymore, right? Mm-hmm. I'm now worried about the business. I'm also overseeing all of our estimating activity and managing half of our work, from a project management standpoint, not to mention dealing with anything that might come up, like an employee that didn't show up, or an employee that's routinely late, or a piece of equipment that's down, or hey, we screwed this material, so we need to get more, you know what I mean? We can't find it anywhere. So what are the resources we have? Stuff like that. When my kind of right hand in the shop was what we called the operations director, which really was like a glorified shop manager position. You're managing 3 to 4 people in the shop. It wasn't a ask or a huge lift from that end, but that person was also doing our ordering and reviewing our engineering and making sure people had stuff to do. And so when I needed to hire that position, after I lost 2 key roles right at the same time, our field manager, our installation manager, and my operations director, they both moved out of state. It wasn't like hey, we're moving to the shop down the road. And my bandwidth was already maxed, probably beyond maxed, to be honest, as any small business owner can attest. So I needed help trying to hire that operations director position. And I did look into a couple of the industry specific recruiters. Unfortunately, the first 2 I reached out to, it didn't really work out. Both experiences weren't ones that left me with a lot of confidence that like this was going to be an option. So I ended up using a general placement agency in the Denver area. So I'm not going to use an industry specific recruiter. I'll use somebody that, close to where we are, right? Or in the city we're in. And had my reservations expressed to the owner of that company. And she's like, oh, my husband he's a general contractor. So I think I understand your industry. I'm like, all right, fine. I'm also like, any help I can get at this point. I'm not thinking super critically, unfortunately, because again, pretty maxed out trying to keep everything rolling. And it just didn't work out. They brought me in full of candidates. The one we hired ended up not working. It wasn't a wonderful experience. And this was towards actually the end of my company's lifetime. And at the same time, I had joined years prior a best practice group through AWI, a group of shop owners, your marketplace. You get together occasionally and chat about business. And again, my involvement in AWI was and continues to be invaluable, honestly. I think it's one of the best things you can do if you're an owner in this industry. But my best practice group was sharing similar experiences with the same 2 recruiters I had tried using. But thankfully, I've since learned, now that I'm in the industry, I've learned that there's actually a handful of really great industry-specific recruiters. And I wish I had done more research when I had my business. So my best practice group was just talking about similar issues. And that was at that point, I had decided to close my business right after kind of made that key hire and was trying to figure out, okay, what's next for me? I just had that moment of, heck, I've been hiring and firing in this industry for 10 years, almost 10 years. Maybe I can take a crack at this. To be honest, had a bit of I don't want to call it fish in a barrel, but I had like a bit of a built-in clientele in my best practice group. So those guys, they're like, yeah, that seems like a great idea. We'd absolutely give you a crack at helping us hire some people. That was like mid to late 2019, I believe. Yeah, we all know what happened 6 months later. I guess, it doesn't get us quite up to date, but it gets us to the start of Dovetail for sure.
Yeah, there was an end to Boston woodworking, right? And through your experience there, as well as your best practice group and kind of the network you had built, you felt, hey, I've got the experience. Obviously you'd built a relationship with some potential built-in clients. You mentioned other owners that obviously trusted you as an owner and kind of a unique perspective and being able to. And as an owner, if I had built a relationship over years with another owner in the same industry, and then suddenly they were like, hey, I want to help you fill your positions, it seems like a no-brainer, right?
And especially considering you have to get into the big companies to where they actually have a HR or a people function. And even those $20 million a year shops probably don't have somebody dedicated to this. And the people that should be doing it or could be doing it are already task saturated. Again, these are small businesses, right? So the people I'm dealing with in terms of whether it's the owner of the company or hiring manager, say hiring manager, that person typically is going to be like a COO or a VP of something, right? Technically a hiring manager, that is the person tasked with hiring for that role. And this is third or fourth hat they're wearing. So being able to outsource that. And that's something, frankly, that was key to Boston Woodworking success. We didn't close because we had run out of work. We closed because I decided I didn't want to continue to grow the business. And I realized it was going to be difficult to grow the business in Denver for very specific reasons, namely the cost of industrial real estate, thanks to recreational marijuana. Denver, I knew if we were going to expand, we needed a bigger footprint, and if that wasn't happening and our margin was going to take a huge hit. And we were in double-digit margin. I was really happy with where Boston was. So forcing it to grow just wasn't something I was willing to take on. Why I got a tangent. But
you started Dovetail, right? And you sounds like 4 years into this now. But for those that maybe don't know, I did a podcast, a number of podcasts with Vicky, another peer of yours, recruiter. But why is it so important that you focus just on our industry, architectural woodwork, and what are the unique challenges of recruiting? Because as you mentioned, you had a recruiter that wasn't in our industry reach out to you when you were recruiting. What is unique about this niche that your experience lends to focusing on it?
I think
versus just recruiting for industry.
No, absolutely. And I'm trying to think of the best way to say this because I could probably talk for an hour about it. I think thankfully, my business partner, despite not understanding necessarily how to run the ins and outs of a commercial millwork business, so I got a really great business education. And what I learned in my little $2.5 million a year shop, we're managing our finances very differently than even a lot of much larger shops, even today. Some of my clients still couldn't tell me at any one point how well one of their projects is doing. And that's something I could do at any second. In my company, as long as we had input everything in a timely fashion, I knew what our margin looked like. I knew whether we needed to shift up or shift down in terms of what our margin was doing, what it was going to cost to close the project, stuff like that. So I got a great kind of general business education, I feel like, but then of course it was specific to architectural woodworking, right? Like the commercial TI world. And I think the best way I've come to put this, I think the most unique challenge in what we do as commercial mill workers, and I still put myself in that group because, like I said, it's in my blood, is we hard bid custom engineering. No two projects are the same. Yes, you might have similar things, break room cabinetry, whether it's 8-foot run or a 13-foot run or whatever, right? Yes, largely the same. Still different, though the dimensions are still different. It's not widgets.
Right.
So I think understanding that, like understanding how just the dynamics of the business, because I don't want to say that like our industry is unique because our margin it's such like it's like a tightrope. I don't know other industries, but I'm sure every industry has its challenges, and I'm sure everyone wants to protect their margin. I just feel like I have a good understanding of how woodworkers, all the things that go into maintaining those margin dollars, right? And then understanding potential candidates, potential employees, experience level. And again, as it's solely specific to this work, the architectural woodworking world, 9% of my clients do the things I did, which is commercial TI work. So yeah, that really to me is what I would consider my competitive advantage, not coming from the recruiting side of things, but coming from the millwork side of things, having a lot of experience hiring and firing, just understanding what makes a millwork business tick. And then, as I put it, reading between the lines on a candidate's resume to know if they fit what my client's looking for. Mostly just from an experience standpoint. I don't unfortunately get to work with companies all over the country, so I don't unfortunately get to spend time, boots on the ground, understand their culture and everything. I can glean some of that from discussions with leadership and whoever else I'm dealing with for any particular position. That's really what makes our industry unique, is just that idea. You're putting a number on something that isn't fully engineered, right? Because an architect is not going to hand you shop drawings. You're going to hand them shop drawings. And we're doing the quote unquote interpretation of design intent and telling somebody how you get to that weird ceiling feature that you want, right? It's easy to draw on paper or print on paper, but sometimes getting there and overlaying your MEP drawing and everything else and understanding how it's actually going to work can be two very different things, and understanding what goes into that at the estimation level, right? You have to know these things when you're estimating. Otherwise, you are going to see some erosion in margin. And frankly, no one wants that.
So would you say that you understand from personal experience when a company or an owner comes to you looking for a role, the bigger problem they're trying to solve, or they're trying to run a business, they're trying to fill a void that they might not even be able to define very clearly themselves. Hey, I need an engineer, I need a project manager. A lot of times it's probably, I need to replace this person that I no longer have that was in a hybrid role. And from your experience, you're either able to understand, okay, what does that mean? Or B, maybe I need to help you write a clearer job description of what this should be, as well as how to go find the right candidate with the right skills for that. Do you feel that you said before you're able to read between the lines, and what I interpret that is okay, you're able to glean what they're not able to communicate because of your experience.
Yes and no. I think oftentimes companies, for the most part, that are seeking out recruiting services, it's a very deliberate action. And yes, it might be in response to losing somebody, in which case this is a set, need this role filled, right? You have that mild panic moment. But typically, it's a very deliberate action on the shop owner or manager, or whoever I'm dealing with, on their part. So I think for the most part, my clients understand what they're looking for. Yes, helping them articulate it, helping fine tune a job description, helping put together a job description, because they may not have one. And yes, those are the things I do. I don't feel like I necessarily read between the lines on what my clients are asking. I feel like I read between the lines on on someone's resume, a candidate's resume, and really understanding that you have a year of microvellum and 3 years of cabinet vision. You're great in AutoCAD with some 3D modeling experience. I can then understand that this is going to work well in my client's shop, or it's not.
Yeah.
Things like that, I think. And also just understanding the type of work that they've done, because I know the shops in the industry. I know who does what.
Yeah.
And when I see certain names on a resume, and I know it's going to translate well to a similarly sized shop, let's say.
Yeah.
So even just things like that, to be honest, came from, being in the industry, getting involved in the industry, and meeting folks at AWI. Right? I've not looked at this metric, but I would imagine the bulk of my clients are AWI members.
Yeah. So your experience, you would say, is more valuable or differentiator on the recruiting side, on the candidate profiling and filtering and interviewing side. Do you find that candidates talk to you differently when you're speaking with them based on your experience and your knowledge and how you're able to engage and ask questions versus somebody who maybe doesn't have that hands-on experience who's recruiting?
I'm a New Englander at heart, so I'm not one to usually toot my own horn. But yeah, I get that feedback a lot from candidates, actually.
Yeah.
That they haven't talked to too many recruiters that actually, quote unquote, speak the language. I do an intake call with my clients. I guess it is a little preemptive. I understand the questions I'm going to get on the candidate side. So I'm asking, how's your shop floor set up? Whose equipment do you have? Not just that you have a beam saw, or, are you guys running flat table, or you point to point? What is your kind of manufacturing method, right? I don't care if you use 5/8 sides or 3/4 inch sides. And then right down to the software and everything else that they're doing and how they're set up. Yes, I get that feedback a lot from candidates that I know a little bit more than the next recruiter they're dealing with. Let's be honest, they're probably dealing with multiple recruiters. I know people get hit up a lot, and I do a lot of the contact. I'm no different than other recruiters that way. But yeah, I do get that feedback, that always makes me feel good, because like I said, I do feel like that is my competitive advantage in this industry.
Awesome. Now, the types of roles that you're recruiting for, obviously there's everything from shop personnel to delivery drivers to installers to executive, but by nature, there's a cost to recruiting, there's time involved, right. And there's also within each organization, there's fewer of certain positions than there are of others. So do you find, that recruiting ends up aggregating towards certain positions? You spend your time a lot more filling project managers or CEO or a certain type of role?
Yes, and kind of hit it on the head there. I don't recruit for fabricator positions. I'm not going to find your next cabinet maker, unfortunately. I have in the past recruited for kind of department head positions, so lead finisher, assembly managers. It kind of depends how the shop's set up and what type of shop you are, but for the most part, it's what I call butts and seats positions. So I would say the bulk of my work is estimators, engineers, project managers. Simply to your point about, there's only so many CEOs at a company, right? I do occasionally get involved with, you would consider the C-suite at any one of these companies, right? These
right.
Presidents, CEOs, whatever they call it. But again, it's butts and seats positions.
Like, obviously there's a huge amount of need for engineers, project managers. And I'm just speaking from my experience. There's always been a high turnover rate in project managers in particular. Whereas in engineering, I don't know, there's as much of a turnover rate as there is just a need. And then the demand is growing. Estimators, similarly is just a growing need. But do you find there's a higher turnover rate in certain positions than others, or that it's more just growth based that you're filling roles?
I don't find a higher turnover rate anywhere, thankfully. And this is really just specific to my clients, right? Most of my clients are repeat. And typically, look, it's the trades. I experienced this as a shop owner. I think anyone in the skilled trades experiences this in their marketplace. There's always a little bit of the grass is greener mentality. I had people leave my shop and come back a year later. You know what I mean? And I always just welcomed them because we hired you for a reason in the first place. I'm not going to be mad you left. You know what I mean? Yes, you created a hole, but if there's a position or the same position, we'll hire you back. I think there's a certain amount that happens, but for the most part, it's growth. Especially right now, it feels I'm helping people grow their departments rather than replace people in their departments. So, which is good. But I say that, and that's really now. In the past, it's been replacing. But no, to answer your question specifically, I haven't really seen any higher turnover rates really anywhere else. I think the turnover sometimes ends up happening just at the kind of lower end of the employee spectrum, let's say. So newer folks, whether they get hired away, I think new blood in any one of these marketplaces, people can smell. And it's a huge industry, but it's a small world. I haven't really seen anything specific. I wish I could tell you that there's this one, we need more of these people. And anymore seems I'm seeing, and this is again, just my data point. Engineering standpoint, I think software is there's a little less variability. I used to have clients that were solving their shop drawing or their submittal drawing, production drawing, G-code problem, many different ways to now people are going to the two big ones or going back to winding up in the two big ones, I would say, which to be honest is a good thing. I have right now, I'm literally working on a PM, an engineer, and an estimator. And that's the bulk of what I do. If you want to say there's more turnover in those departments, I think it's relative to the size of the department. There's just more people there, and that's just bad to have. There's more people in the estimate department than there is on your leadership team.
For those who may be listening who, are like, how do I become a good candidate for one of those positions, PM, engineer, estimator? Because there's obviously a lot of demand, and it will continue to be, would you say, in the future, a lot of demand for those roles?
Yeah.
So what are the things that you look for? What would maybe somebody young that's interested or working in a shop or somewhere and say, how do I get there? What type of experience or knowledge do they need to be able to gain to a strong candidate for one of those roles?
Not to put too blunt of a point on it, but experience. So unfortunately, yes, I know that there are some education programs out there that are somewhat tailored to the industry. Like with anything else, I shouldn't say like with anything else. One of the challenges facing our industry is the fact that there isn't any sort of formalized training structure that's recognized nationally. So to be honest, I think there was at one point had my shop, I lost it to someone who literally bought a bunch of contractor grade equipment at Home Depot and set up in their garage. The barrier to entry is low, but it is a knowledge base that's incredibly specific and complex. And you know this better than most because you're in the engineering side of it.
Yeah.
You don't learn how to engineer, like I said, some sort of weird ceiling element in anywhere other than watching it happen. So if you're new to the industry, let's say you are an engineer, find a place that you can be happy for at least a couple years, then get as much experience as you can. You can pitch in on the shop floor, do it, or at the very least, take some walks on the shop floor, see how things are happening, understand what type of equipment is involved in making millwork today, because it looks different than when even I had my shop. When we were thinking about growing everything, robotics were becoming a big thing, automated storage was becoming a big thing. Things were getting more automated. And as we looked at growing, I was looking at the new equipment, and it's just a little different. It's become more of that how you transfer the information than anything else, right? Because we all have to be making things out of wood or whatever else we're making it out of. So really, I would say experience. This is true for probably anyone. If I have a resume in front of me, someone's been in the industry for 5 years and they've been at 3 or 4 different places. What I can tell you, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. There's 2 sides to every story, but I can tell you that 9.9 times out of 10, my client, the shop owner or hiring manager is going to ask me that question or is going to express a concern about that many places in that amount of years. So really just getting in somewhere, it doesn't matter, what software they're running or how they're doing what they're doing. It's just getting experience doing it. This industry, it's experience. I don't know how else I can't sharpen the point any more than that.
You mentioned that there's not really any universal training program, and there are some programs, but in general, you're hiring and recruiting people that are working in a company, a competitor, or somewhere across the nation in the role that you're hiring for. Would you say that's the majority of the time?
Yeah, for the most part, person that my client's going to hire is already employed.
In the role or a similar role to what they're being hired for, right? Because speaking to your client and companies in this industry, I think that's their fear, right? Is, hey, I'm going to invest all this time in getting them to this place, they're going to get poached. And what are the reasons? Do you glean anything from candidates on like top reasons they're leaving, basically? Hey, why am I on the market? Why am I interested in taking this other role from where I'm at? I mean, obviously money is probably a number one.
I wouldn't necessarily say that. I think, there's a money component tied to any sort of career growth. If you're taking the next step in your career, you want to see that bump in pay. But I would say a lot of people that I work with are willing to make lateral moves from a financial standpoint, but it's going to be an increase in responsibility, and that will equate to that next rung on the ladder in terms of job title is. If I'm recruiting for a management type position, and on up, I will often get, I wasn't looking, or I didn't even know I was looking until you sent me this message, and the role sounds interesting. So let's check. And it's rare that I'm recruiting for a senior project manager position and just another senior project manager from some other place. There has to be something else going. What they're looking to relocate, that's a driving factor for family reasons or whatever else. Typically it's reasons. To say that there's a lot more options, but there really aren't. Another big one I see is people don't see, there's 2 sides to every story. One side a lot of times, but people don't see growth at their current company. They see the person in role above them who they report to directly not moving for many years, and they're ready to take that next step. So that could be, it is hard to get people to relocate in this industry just for a job. Typically, like I said, there has to be another factor. That can be money, but a lot of times it's, I have family there, or I grew up there, or I used to work, and I want things like that.
Yeah. I think it's important, and what I'm hoping to illustrate for company owners or people in this industry that can have an impact is, obviously you can recruit all day long, right? And you can go continue to find candidates, but those candidates have to come from somewhere, was one side of things. And as an industry, there's a huge gap in producing new talent, young talent, people that are going to continue to fill these roles in the future, right? And really, they have to come from industry. They have to get experience in a shop, and to be willing to do that. And I think what I want to combat a little bit is the narrative like, well, nobody wants to work, or nobody has experience, so there's no young people interested in this industry. And and this is just me speaking, I'm not putting words in your mouth, but why should a young person join this industry? What future do they see? And do they see a future? And we have, as businesses in this industry, manufacturers and the people who make up this industry have to create that future. And so there has to be a path. As you mentioned, a lot of people might take a lateral move because they see a better future over here. Not that today this is giving me more money or more anything, but it's a future. And so if you're not actively outlining a path that somebody can go from the shop floor to the office to a leadership role or whatever it is that they're trying to do, and they see a long-term path there has to be earning potential there, but there also has to be what they want to do. There has to be motivation and growth and learning. That one is going to give you the people you need internally as you need those roles. But two, collectively, that is how there's only, the pyramid gets smaller, right? As people rise up in your organization, there's only so many presidents and CEOs. There's only so many ops leaders, right? There is naturally going to be some turnover up and out, right? But that is a recruiting tool for you as a company as well. If people see, oh, I can go there, and people that go work there either move up or they move on to better things, that attracts people to come want to work for you. If more companies are doing that, that creates more people with the experience that you as a business owner need in your organization and are going to continue to need to fill in the future. So I think if anybody could take anything from this, hopefully candidates are learning, hey, there is opportunity in this industry. There is career opportunity in this industry, not just a trade job, which I know gets a bad rap. And there's lots of people now doing a lot of work to change. And this is a career. I made a conscious decision. You made a conscious decision to join this industry. And there was a path to that of gaining experience. But from the business owner's standpoint and leaders in this industry, your clients and my clients, frankly, there's work you can do and should be doing to also help yourself and help the industry, which helps you. And I think that's creating a path, hiring people and giving them a path of, hey, maybe I'm filling a bench role or I'm filling a cabinet assembler role today, but there's a path from that to CNC operator, to shop foreman, to engineer, to whatever, right? You have to have those pipelines. Otherwise, you're just going to lose people in the long term.
Oh, I completely agree with you. I've said this before. So clients do the effort, so therefore it's money, right? If you can in any way codify those processes, meaning put them on paper, if you can literally show someone who is, coming to high school or college for that matter, but to your point, you have dreams of being an engineer, let's say, zero experience. So I think some of the best engineers, to be happy to get your input on this, come from the shop floor. They come from making things, like literally assembling. And so, hey, it's 12 months, 18 months here. It's 6 months in shops. Have different names for this, but whether it's process engineer or whatever they call it, but like the engineer kind of running the bridge between the engineering department and the fabrication department, spending X amount of time there. And then you're moving on up, learning the roles. But if you can formalize that process in any way to where you can show a potential employee what it looks like and then say, yeah, so who's now heading up our engineering department, 8 years ago or 10 years ago was on the shop floor building cabinets. I think that is one of the best things you can, you and I could probably have a whole different podcast to talk about.
Yeah.
Employee development, workforce development. It's just now, I hadn't gone to AWI for 4 years conference, but like for the last 5 years I went to it prior to 2019, every seminar topic was, where's your next employee coming from? Right.
Yep.
So like that is a huge conversation and there's a lot of things going on there, but without getting into that, my personal opinions and feelings about it or beliefs about it. Yeah. I think that if you can literally show people what it looks like, benchmark it against some salary ranges and just understand that there is a career path. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you're making something. This always comes up. I can see it coming when I find someone that's been in an engineering position that, let's say they estimated or they engineered or engineer for a millwork company, 5 years ago, but they've spent the last 3 years doing engineering or estimating in a related industry, meaning a construction trade. Let's say you're engineering cell phone towers, right? And that's all you do because that's what all your company does. You went from, drawing complex millwork projects to that. What I'll hear, most of the time is, I miss the variety. I miss the complexity, I miss the challenge. of curved reception desk, right? That's 18 feet long.
Right.
And same with estimator. A candidate actually who was an estimator in the industry has been estimating in commercial roofing now and is just looking to get back into, and not just back into estimating more complex projects. He's making a lot, and that's the challenge. It's easier and he's making more, but it's also getting back into a shop environment. This also on the PM side there are a handful of companies there that actually don't produce anything, even though they are in the commercial millwork industry. They sell everything and manage the project. I have a lot of PMs from those companies say, I want to be able to walk out on the shop floor and see what we're making. I think that's totally legitimate. And I think those are the people, ultimately, it starts with that kind of love for something, right? The desire to see something made, in this case, out of wood. And
awesome.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think that's a lot of good value you've shared, and hopefully people take some of this to heart that you're sharing. There's two questions that I like to end with that I ask every guest, and it's related to what we're talking about already. But the first is, what do you see changing in the industry over the next 5 to 10 years?
I would say the thing that gives me hope, like the workforce development, is that as long as architects and designers exist, we'll exist as commercial millwork. Whether or not we have people that man the shop is the question. But I think yes, the low-hanging fruit to answer the question would be remote work, right? And more companies getting themselves, whether that's from like hardware, software standpoint, to where you can share information effectively, or even just psychologically and emotionally being okay with not seeing that person sitting in your office. Because I have clients who are really well with an ERP to share information. They're not willing to engineer, be remote. Well, you're really limiting yourself because you're in Central Ohio. So I think that, to me, I'd love to be able to answer that question from a shop floor standpoint too. I could tell you what I saw when I stopped going to all trade shows, more automation, but to me, it is part of the same conversation where as shops begin to share information better, they hopefully get more efficient. I think it's more of a hope than a prediction. Woodshop owners get better at allowing for remote employees. Understand that you can make a cabinet remotely, but you can estimate, engineer, a lot of cases, project remote.
Oh, 100%. People are doing it today.
My hope is that more people do it.
It becomes, more people do it. They get better. It's like you said, codifying your processes. I don't know if I told this story recently, but I got my eye exam recently, and I went to an eye doctor that the eye doctor themselves was not in the office. They were on video, and they were able to control the equipment that they did the eye exam. They were probably outside of the country, honestly, but I was able to get a prescription, get my eyes examined with the technician not there. And if they're able to do that, I think we could do a lot of what we're doing. I know we can because I'm doing it, but it's like you said, it's owners it takes some acceptance and change and process. On the flip side of that, what do you see staying the same over the next 5 to 10 years in our industry?
I think it's probably how I started the answer to the previous question, is the fact that as long as architects and designers exist, we'll exist, and we'll continue what we do, which is engineering, doing the actual engineering on complex custom items.
Yeah.
I would say that's what I see staying the same, is that we're going to have to continue to develop the people that can, or make it interesting to the people. That has to be the draw. The fact that you're making something complex at the end of the day, there's a physical thing, that's been produced. And if that's very rewarding for a certain type of person. Yeah. I think we're always going to have to spend that time figuring out what people actually want and then making it a reality.
Really appreciate you taking time to speak with me today and share about what you're doing. If people want to contact you or find out more about you and Dovetail Recruiting, what's the best way they can reach out or they can find out more information?
Website's probably the best way. It's just dovetailrecruiting.com, and you can contact me through my website. And then obviously you can also find me on LinkedIn and both Dovetail's page and my personal page, which at this point seem one and the same.
We'll link those in the show notes
Appreciate
so that
that.
everybody has quick access to them. Look forward to continuing our conversations. Hopefully having you on again. We can have that other conversation about the future of
thank you very much.
where our talent's coming from.
It's been my pleasure, and absolutely at some point. And
Awesome.
I think it's great that you're doing this, and it's another resource for people, like you said, to get some insight into what this industry's like. Probably even expand internally. People get an idea of who's there and what they're doing, and probably their eyes open to parts of the industry they didn't know about, even though they're in the industry. So it's great.
Thank you, Seth.
Jake,
And until next time.
awesome.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.